Let's get started.
This won't pick you up unless you're really loud. Good, talking to you.
Okay, can you hear me back there? Can you hear me? Anyways, welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Luli and I'm an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets here every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church at 301 North Main Street at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. However, if you wish not to be recorded, just simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves by their first name only? Nobody know? Hi, Teresa.
I'm Elliot. I'm an alcoholic. It's my first time at this meeting.
Hi, Elliot.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Mike.
Alex, alcoholic. First time at this meeting.
Hey, Alex. Anybody else? Okay. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. So would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Great. See one of these folks after the meeting. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? No? Okay. So we have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one free of charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of these big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them, please place your donations in the back of the hall in that jar down there. And if you would like a CD of any speaker, past or present, please see Ron after the meeting. They're available free of charge, and there's a vast library of them. And I've asked Zach to come up and read the AA preamble.
Hi, my name's Zach. I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other so that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I've asked Teresa to please come up and read the 12 steps.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm an alcoholic. 1, we admitted we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, saw through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to the alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
The 7th tradition, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. So at this time we'd like to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees, but we do have expenses, such as the coffee, the cream, the donuts, the sliders, and the sausages, and all of the good food for tonight. There's absolutely no smoking on church property. And if you could all please silence your cell phones and limit movement during the meeting, that would be great. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker. She's a very good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, and she comes via the Beacon Group in Boston, Massachusetts. Please welcome Cecily T.
Blanket with me. Hi, my name is Cecily and I'm an alcoholic. And I am a real alcoholic. I'm not a heavy drinker. I'm not someone who made a few mistakes. I am very much a real alcoholic. And so hopefully tonight I'll share with you my experience, strength, and hope as a real alcoholic so you understand where I'm coming from and also how I have managed to navigate away from the pain and suffering that this disease inflicted into my life before I had my first spiritual awakening, which was a very rude awakening. So my sobriety day is April 9th, 2009, sorry, April 17th, 2009. I was 20 days dry when I came into my first AA meeting, but that was many, many, many years after my first Alateen meeting and my last Alateen meeting. So when I was a young girl, up until about 11, for about 2 years I was attending Alateen because both parents were kind of fighting and at odds with each other and telling the kids that they were alcoholics and, you know, and I found great comfort in Alateen. And I loved it. And that was the group that I was told to go to when you have a parent suffering from the disease of alcoholism. And all I knew is that I loved what the message was. I loved how I felt like I was with my tribe. And then late year of being 11 years old, early 12, one of my good buddies came over, and with her she brought pure grain alcohol. And I had Tang, and that was my first like real drink. And so I was skyrocketed. I mean, literally pure grain and Tang that was made for NASA. Like, I was skyrocketed into my first drunk, and I loved it. Like, I couldn't get enough of it. And I drank that night the way that I came to drink unexpectedly many, many times after. I hallucinated that night. I took a water gun. I was an artist, and I had collaged my entire room as a child, and it had taken hours and hours and months. And I took a water gun with my sister and her best friend and my best friend, you know, one of my best friends at that age, and shot all the collage down off the ceiling and was laughing hysterically. So my first drunk brought me to everything that alcohol brought me 2 years later, which is I made my sister lie for me that night because I got alcohol poisoning, and she told my mom that I had the flu. I was supposed to take care of my brother that night, and I left him downstairs alone playing with his action figures. And I destroyed my art. And, you know, I had tried alcohol once before when I was 9 years old. It was Maloney. It was that green, like syrupy stuff, and it was in a little nip that my father had brought back from a business trip, and we used to collect the little nips. And that's like a little, by the way, if you're collecting nips at age 9, you might want to think about, you know, your step one, think back on that one. But, you know, I remember that, and I remember my first drunk. And I think that's part of what this disease is all about, is that the reason I remember it is because it's the first time I had this like relief and this comfort and this ease and comfort and this sort of spiritual sense of there's something bigger, there's something better. than what I do alone. And what I did alone felt very lonely. It felt very isolated. And I couldn't have told you this as a child. It's really only having done my step work that I can look back and say, like, I was lonely. I was restless. Like, I loved adrenaline. I loved sneaking out of the house. I loved getting into trouble if there was a rule to be broken. I enjoyed it. I loved the highs of sort of like sneaking around and, you know, I loved adrenaline rushes and living in a risky space. And I was discontent at times, which to me I've learned means depressed. And I believe that my depression is sort of like repressed anger. And I was irritable when I wasn't sort of discontent. I was just irritable, and I was easily set off. I was a sensitive soul too, which I've come to learn is a handicap that I really want to overcome. And so that's what I looked like. And so when I picked up this booze, I was like, okay, I feel like the rest of the world. Now, my sister kind of curbed her drinking from then on. She got drunk a bunch more times. She and I went through the same family issues. We had a pretty rough go with our parents. They had a pretty tough divorce, and it lasted a long time. That did not make me the alcoholic. My sister did not become an alcoholic, nor did my brother. I did. I was, and I did. And so, I couldn't get alcohol all the time. And so there were other ways that I enjoyed starting to check out. I loved living in fantasy worlds. I got my hands on cigarettes with one of my other good buddies who was the daughter of a mafia king. And I left other friends behind. One of them's here tonight, who is also sober, a lot more time than I have. But, I really began chasing the things that took me outside of me. And the reason I call myself an alcoholic today is because that's the thing that really helped me get outside of me. That's the thing that really felt unmanageable when I came into these rooms as an alcoholic versus an Alateen years later. So, okay, it looks a lot better on the outside at times in my life. And alcohol served me very well for a long period of time. I was a slow progressor. I had some really good stints in life while I was still out there drinking. And I was able to sweep a lot of the consequences under the rug. I lived in communities. I now look back and I realize I developed my entire life around communities that condoned my behavior versus condemned it. And so the art world, was a big one for me. And living in New York City, and the friends I chose, and going to choose to live with my father and putting my family through a custody trial was because I knew I had more freedom in his house, and I knew that would give me more ability and access to alcohol and cigarettes. And so, every single decision when I look back was so driven by my desire to protect this ability to get my hands on alcohol. And there were some really fun evenings, but there were also the evenings that I fell downstairs. And I fell upstairs. I don't know how I did it, but I did. And, I went away to college. So, my first drink was when I was 11, 12. And my first stint of daily drinking was when I was about 22, 21, 22. I was living in Italy, and I started drinking daily at my lunch hour at school. And that was sort of a thing that Italians did, and so I did that. Prior to that, it was a mix between blackouts, brownouts, occasional controlled drinking, cigarettes. I said I was sober for 2 years, and then I looked back with my sponsor and realized diet pills does not count as sobriety for me. So I was on speed for those 2 years. Yeah. And that is how I define sobriety. I have chosen to stay sober off of all types of mind-altering drugs, and I believe fully in working with the medical community, but I also really seek to stay off of anything that's mind-altering, including things like herbal diet pills. Oh gosh, I mean, college, when I wasn't drinking, it was like I needed to work, I needed to do something. I was constantly seeking to like fix myself, you know? And it's kind of my entire life. Like when I wasn't drinking, I was seeking outside of myself to fix me. And because I was so sensitive, because I could never fix me, I was really self-centered. And because I was never fixed, I was really full of fear. I was constantly fearful about my life and what it was gonna look like and whether I would fit in. And if I did fit in, was I not gonna fit in with the other group? And if I didn't fit in with the other group, was I not gonna fit in with this group? And I didn't really know where I wanted to fit in, so it was like a real mess. And I got out of college and I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And so there was a summer of just like hanging out, watching the same movie, not even drinking every night, just watching the same movie every night at my mom's house, going outside smoking cigarettes, trying to stay away from alcohol. And like that summer is so perfect for me when I think about who I am as an alcoholic, because I was not drinking every day. But I had the ism. I had this this isolation, this loneliness, this fear. Like that's my alcoholism. And I didn't need to drink every day to have that. And when I controlled my drinking, that's what it felt like. And when I didn't control my drinking, I had these beautiful, brief moments of real joy. Earlier, they were longer stints, but as my alcoholism progressed, those became shorter and shorter and shorter because alcohol was betraying me. It could not sustain my disease. And so my disease got bigger than alcohol, and I needed something. But along the way, I had some pretty severe consequences. I hurt my family deeply. And what I mean by that is I created really deep spiritual harm with them. I mean, my mother has struggled with other issues, and yet, I know that she worried about me. Like, how could she not? I was running away in high school. I was constantly, she would say the wrong thing, and I was off to the races, shut her down, walk out of the room. Just so disrespectful, and I was so hard to love. I was really a pain in the you-know-what. And my dad, he was also worried about me. And my sister, she worked for a cigarette company for a short period. She was getting huge cartons of, tons of cigarettes for free. She later, after I made amends to her, told me that she never gave me the cartons because she was so desperate for me to quit. Even though she knew it would save me money, she purposely withheld them from me because she really wanted me to quit smoking. And I tell you that because I couldn't quit smoking until I quit drinking. So, anyways, so I knew something was wrong. I always knew there was something that was wrong. I had forgotten what Alateen was. I had forgotten the things that Alateen had taught me. I have this built-in forgetter. And so I tried to fix myself with the right career, the right people, the right friends that really only just helped protect my right to drink. One of my best friends in New York City when I was living there was a wine connoisseur, and I've gone back and discovered that almost every single one of my really close friends is struggling with heavy consumption or sober. And so tonight, my best friend from 3rd grade is here, sober. My best friend from kindergarten is sober. I have another really good friend from high school who's struggling with eating issues. I found the people that I could get away with this type of behavior that would support my behavior, because none of us had a better solution at that time. And so the career didn't work, the boyfriends didn't work, the city didn't work, the car I never got because I was too scared to drive. I decided that maybe becoming famous was the right thing, so I sought a career in fame, and filmmaking, and I had actually, and continue to have a pretty good go at that, but I moved myself. It was getting really bad in New York City, and I was drinking. So I started drinking in 1999 every night. Sorry, I'm a little all over the place tonight. But in 1999, I started drinking every night, and that went until 2009. So there was 10 years of pretty much drinking every night, with the maybe 4 exceptions, where I had to actually remove myself from my physical circumstances in order to control my drinking. And I did not try hospital. Oh, I did get hospitalized too. I had an accidental overdose, so there was 5 attempts. But I, 2007, I had a dog walker, and he was the only person in my life that kind of saw me on a daily basis. As I started to keep everyone very far away from me. I kept everyone at arm's length. Even my significant other at the time was kept at arm's length. And people later, after making amends, told me that they always felt like they needed to walk on eggshells around me. That if they didn't, I would be gone, right? And that's like something, it's like when someone says to me, okay, you're drinking a little too much coffee, and I think you maybe want to cut back. I don't pack my bags and leave, right? That's what I did when people said, I think you're drinking too much alcohol, you might want to cut back. I'd be like, okay, thanks, bye. That was it, you were out of my life. And so the dog walker, he approached me by bringing 2 of his friends in from Las Vegas who were both sober, and they tried to sit me down and talk to me about their drinking, and I cordially listened to them, right? We cordially listen to people and nod to them, and then I picked up my first bottle that night. And my bottles weren't the little JV, junior varsity bottles. They were the varsity size bottles, okay? And that was my first bottle for that night. And I was definitely a 2-bottle girl night. And if not 2 bottles of wine, I was drinking a 5th of something. And so I was kind of proud of that too. So they tried to talk to me, and I said, I know, but if you had my life, you'd be drinking too. I've got a mom with cancer, a dad who's, had a liver transplant in 1993. He's sick all the time. We never know when he's gonna die. My dog is having hip dysplasia. I'm working an 80-hour week, and I can't get out of my career. Oh God, what were my other excuses? I had so many fantastic excuses, or they seemed like that at the time. I had all sorts of problems in my life and things to celebrate when that seemed appropriate. And I was able to justify from day to day whether it was worthy of celebration or worthy of, self-pity. But generally I was a drinker due to self-pity more than due to celebration at this stage in my life. And so then I couldn't really get around this thing. So I started hiding the bottles, and I knew, so that was the first thing I tried to control. I tried to control the drinking. The red wine was starting to stain the lips and spill on the rug and things like that. So I switched to white, and then I was with the spirits, and then I was, trying brandy, and then there was this weird Dutch thing that I was drinking for a while. I don't even know what it was. And then that wasn't working. So I decided New York City was definitely the problem, and I needed to run from New York City. So as I was considering this, my dad got sick again. I went into work, and at the time I was part of my professional title was writer. And it took me an entire day to write a paragraph. And the next morning, my boss brought the paragraph to me. It was marked, and I had double words. And I had grammatical errors up the wazoo. And she said, what is this? And I said, well, I'm really stressed out about my dad. It's really my dad. I've just got to get to Boston to be with my dad. And really what was happening in my head was go F yourself. You're not going to fire me before I walk on you. I was so protected and guarded. And I said it with a smile. I said it with as much grace as I had within me, and I walked from that job that day, and it was a really good job. And I got home, and 2 weeks later, I got up to Boston, and this was 2008, and was in Boston for 2 weeks. I took out the savings that my grandfather had left me for college, and I started to buy some furniture. And 2 weeks later, the market crashed. So all of a sudden, I was in this town. I knew nobody. I was in an industry that was on a hiring freeze. And the last thing you want to be is an alcoholic on the cusp of a bottom and have nothing to do. I mean, it was the grace of God that brought me there, and I'm so grateful for it today because it finally got me into these rooms, and I am one of you, like, I'm a belligerent alcoholic. And so I decided that the best thing to do would be to run to Brazil and try one last hurrah at becoming famous. So I have forgotten to tell you, Brazil and I have a special relationship. My first time down there, I got kidnapped. My second time down there, I ended up in the ICU with a blood infection. My organs started to shut down. And now I'm going back there to fix my life. And that is my thinking. Like, some people call this a disease of perception. So I'm down in Brazil again, and I'm running around, and I've got this storyline about this former drug dealer gone good that I'm gonna tell on camera. And I've got the whole thing figured out, and I say to him, I sit down in the interview. By the way, I also don't speak Portuguese, so it's a really smart decision when you're a filmmaker to go try and make a film in a different language. So I sit him down and I'm like, so, you know, you told me like art got you sober and fixed your life, so tell me about that. And he was like, well, no, it was actually God. And I just halted in my tracks. I was like, I haven't heard the word God. I hadn't heard the word God in like 10 years. I just hadn't heard, I mean, I didn't want to hear it. And I thought, okay, now I'm even more, you know, I'm in bigger trouble because I've spent all this money to go down to Brazil, and the last thing I'm going to do is make a story about the czar of the universe who is like so lame, and all you people who like God are so lame, and they're radicalized and, you know, fanatical, crazy people. And I was really a little disturbed, and so I started thinking, like any good alcoholic, like, how am I going to manipulate this story to make an award-winning film. And it didn't work out. It was just yet another time when I thought that manipulating, lying in order to please the rest of the world, right, in order to make everybody else happy around me, to change the circumstances within me or somebody else, was the right thing to do. Like, that's what people pleasing is. I'm a lying, manipulative human being. I'm a self-centered individual when I'm doing that. When I'm like, oh, let me be nice to you. Like, no, let me fix you. Let me make you better. Like, that's all about me. I don't want to feel uncomfortable because you're not feeling okay, right? I don't want to feel uncomfortable because you're talking about God. And so anyways, that trip sort of went off. I brought back a bunch of footage that I couldn't actually transcribe because I couldn't speak the language. And got back up, and I was controlling my drinking down there, by the way, which was a really pleasant thing to do. And I was really pleasant to be around too. And I lost the friendship of the woman that hosted me while I was down there that time. And so I got back, and I was going to stay at my sister's house. And my sister at this point had gone into public health and international relations and had married an environmentalist and had a little boy, and their house was all sort of environmentally clean. It was this beautiful, beautiful apartment in New York. This is the sister that didn't want me smoking, and I stayed at her house while they were away. And the next morning I woke up coming out of a blackout, and the whole apartment was covered in ash because I had been, just our typical evening, right? Like, it was me and my booze and my cigarettes. And I opened the windows to keep the apartment from getting too stinky, and instead the ashes were swirling around the apartment all night long. And that's how cool I was, it was like the Four Horsemen. I was just talking about this earlier with someone tonight, like the Four Horsemen, it's this loneliness, like this deep, deep loneliness and this despair, this humiliation, this shame. And all of this it was almost unfeelable because I was so empty and so broken. And so I went back to my apartment in Boston. I was in New York the night I arrived back from Brazil, and I went back to New York. And I drank for like another week or two. I couldn't control it when I was in my own environment. My stepmother, who at the time I called my stepmonster, called me out on being drunk over the phone, and I slurred back at her, saying I'm not drunk, you know. Of course I was. And I hated her all the more. And then I found out I had to go in for surgery. And so that was my bottom. It wasn't getting kidnapped, it wasn't any of that stuff. I found out I had to go in for surgery because I had internal hemorrhaging going on. And it wasn't specifically related to the booze, it was specifically related to the life I led because of the booze. And so I had not been taking care of myself. And so I remember thinking, well, thank God I'm gonna go under the knife, because then I'm gonna be stuck at the hospital and I'm gonna be in a place where I can control myself and be safe from my drinking for a couple days, and I'll get it under control. And like, it was that moment that I realized something was really off on me. Like, I didn't wanna be a victim, and yet there I was, such a victim. And I was mortified that I thought that. I was mortified that I was so scared to be in my own skin, I was willing to go in for surgery. And I did, and I stayed dry for 20 days. And the mental obsession, along with the cravings, because I was not 90 days sober at that point, I was 20 days sober. So the actual craving, the physical craving took place in my body, and the mental obsession of like, I need to check out, I just need to get out of my own skin, came over me. And I knew that if I went to go get the amount of booze that I needed to get drunk, I was gonna rupture the stitches, so that was not an option. And out of pride for being a producer, I didn't want to disrupt the budget I had set for my like get well period. So instead I marched myself to a meeting. And the very first amend that I ever had to make in sobriety was yelling at the information booth guy at the Massachusetts General Hospital, because I couldn't find the meeting, because I was like a whirlwind. And he was trying to tell me, and I ended up screaming at him. I never scream at information booth people, ever. I actually thank toll people every single time I go through a toll booth now. And I wish them a good day, and I try and compliment them. And that is a living amend to anybody that is having to work with the public. I do not want to be that jerk that ruins their day anymore. And I got to my first meeting. There were 2 women at that meeting. They came up to me at the break, and one of them was 3 months sober, 18 years old, and one of them was 17 years sober, from Brazil, and super happy. And I was like, I literally told her to get out of my face. But the woman with 3 months, I could hear. I could see her face, I could identify just enough with her. And she and I hung out for 2 hours after the meeting, because her sponsor had told her that she is to be of service. So she showed up for this woman who is 20 plus years older than her, and listened to me for 2 hours, because she was so foggy, she probably had no idea what she was supposed to be doing. But she helped me. So like, if you have 3 months of sobriety, if you have 2 months of sobriety, if you've got 2 days of sobriety, you've got more than someone else coming into these rooms. And please don't forget it, because you get to help your sobriety, and you might help someone else. And that woman helped me go from being an addictive personality with a lot of drama to being an alcoholic, which means that I get to be a part of my tribe. I get to be a part of a community. And this community has launched me back into so many other communities. I mean, I can't even believe where my life has been taken. But that was my first AA meeting, those 2 women. And it was 2 women, not one, it was 2 women that helped me. And the next day, that 18-year-old took me to another meeting, and I said, will you take me to another? And she said, well, my sponsor told me that you have to go alone now. So that was my first resentment in AA. And I'm still forgiving him, but you know, anyways, I went to that meeting that night, the second day in the fellowship, and I was riddled with fear This is 6 months coming out of a job at 30 Rockefeller Center, being, considered top of my gig, one of the highest paid producers and writers. I hid in the broom closet because I was so scared of all of you. I was just riddled, and my whole body was detoxing. I just couldn't, and I really honestly thought like an ostrich sticks their head in the sand. Like I really thought that you guys didn't see me because I hadn't looked up in so long that I was blind to the world around me, and I just figured everyone else was too. And instead, like 4 women this time came over, and one of them sat next to me, and I noticed that. And then there was another woman that said, I'm looking for sponsees. And then another woman told about how, amazing her life was today. But no one just came at me. They kind of got where I was. That space when you're just so raw. You're so raw, like you're raw to the bone. I mean, I literally actually even had my nerves, diagnosed as raw nerves. I was raw, and I just was raw on the inside physically. I was raw mentally. I was so broken. And these women just gently approached me. And one of them took me to another meeting. So it was my 3rd meeting that day. And it was a gay men's meeting, and they were talking about the 4th step. And I had gotten drunk with the gay men. I didn't know what the 4th step was, but it sounded like, there was this thing that you were cleansing, and I had gotten drunk with a lot of gay men in New York City because I was in the arts. And I've come to realize, whatever higher power is out there, we get what we need. And I was kind of at home in that meeting. And I attended that meeting for a long time, along with women's. And one night I walked in the men's bathroom, and I was like, I'm not having an identity crisis. And one of the old timers was like, well, there's no coincidences. That's not very nice. And you guys hurt my feelings a lot in the early stages. You told me I was selfish, and you told me I was self-centered, and you told me I was self-seeking, and you told me I was dishonest and full of fear. I was pathetic, and I was a coward, And I did not like hearing that. And I was a drama queen too, by the way. Artists, we have great imaginations, and I was a really big drama queen. And getting sober in those early stages, there was no place to channel it. I didn't know how to give it over to God, so I didn't know what to do with it. And it was pretty painful, actually. It's one of my character defects. And anyways, I went through the steps quickly. One of those women who had approached me, I chose her because she was dressed correctly, according to me, the broken New Yorker. And it turned out she was a big book thumper. And she said to me, which is what got me, she's like, you drank like a rock star, you're gonna get sober like a rock star. And I was like, yes! So, and then I was hanging out at these meetings that were really social, and I still perceived myself as a huge socialite, so I was like, yes, again, I've got the 2 things I need to be okay. And it was true, that's all I needed actually in early sobriety, was a lot of laughter and thinking that there was a way to become a rock star. And it's been a journey since then. So I have been through the 12 steps quite a few times. I've had 3 sponsors. I love them all. I'm so grateful for each one of them. I've had some amazing grant sponsors. And I've had some amazing, amazing friendships develop in this fellowship. And I have reconnected, like I said, to some old buddies of mine. And I've made some new buddies. And I've gotten to know a whole world of ways and types of people that I would not have otherwise mixed with or cared, if I was mixing with them, cared to get to know. And so today I'm sandwiched between my sponsor, who has a sponsor, and I sponsor women. And I will also sponsor gay men. When asked, I consider it a privilege to sponsor people. I learn something every time, each time I go through the steps with somebody. whether I'm going through the steps or whether I'm the recipient of hearing somebody else's step work. The first time I did my steps, I had a lot of cleaning up to do comparative to today. The first step, like, I'm powerless over alcohol. Yep. My life is unmanageable. That grows every day. So every day, I'm still powerless over alcohol, but I'm also powerless over whether my stepmother is going to be nice to me today. I'm powerless over whether or not the weather is going to work in my behalf or not. I'm powerless over whether my boss is going to be a good person. I'm powerless over a lot of things. I'm just, life is not manageable. Like, that's it. So I'm powerless over alcohol. Life is unmanageable. All of life is unmanageable. And it's great. I don't have to manage it. But I didn't understand that that was a great thing until kind of step 7. So I'm really glad I got through 1 through 7 pretty quickly, because it was a pretty unbearable feeling, like, during those stages. And I remember even saying to him, well, okay, so that's 1. 2, I was given the grace of sort of seeking something that could restore me to sanity. But the truth was, when my sponsor really asked me, is alcohol bigger than you? I was able to say yes. She said, is there something bigger than alcohol? And I was able to say yes, and that was it. That's all I needed. Like, I was allowed to think about the czar of the universe and the powers of be and the great outdoors and a group of drunks and all this cool stuff. It was really just knowing that there was something bigger. And then step 3 came along. It was pretty simple. We went to the beach. My first sponsor took me to the beach, and I memorized the prayer. We sat at the beach. I said the prayer. I made a decision, and that was it. I didn't think about what God would, I mean, if I had to think about God, I would have ended up back in Brazil getting kidnapped. Like, that's where my brain took me. I cannot figure out God. And thank God I'm not. Like, thank goodness. And I found a God of my understanding through doing the next set of steps, 4 through 9. So 4 was like a big tattletale session, and started out with a lot of griping and complaining and drama and pain. Oh my gosh, the pain that life had put me through. Like, life had been awful to me, by the way, like really awful, according to my first 4th step. I was a victim. I was lied to, I wasn't worthy, I was also grandiose, and I wasn't treated respectfully. So yeah, victim was my big go-to. And pity, and the morass of pity, I mean, it just was like all over, and I was really judgy, and I was really grudgy. And like, it made me sick to think about after, doing all this work. And I just had this beautiful sponsor take me through all of my resentments, which I later came to understand resentment's not just anger. Resentment means resentire, which means, I'm not even saying it right probably, but it's to relive something. So if you're reliving something, you're living in the past, and there's something there to learn. So if you're reliving, whether it's through anger or fear or something, like if you're reliving yesterday, there's something you get to learn from it because you're reliving it. So you may as well learn from it. And then there's fear, which was the second part of the inventory, which is living in tomorrow. And it's the wreckage of, for me, with my fabulous imagination, I lived in the wreckage of the future. I could not live in the wreckage of beauty, the future of possible beauty, because I had not seen beauty in so long. I had not allowed myself to be open to it. Alcohol did not bring me to it, so I didn't really know how to live in the belief that life was going to be okay. Life is okay. Resentments, fears, sex, that was fun. I was a jerk. Moving on, I was told to stay away from a lot of people, and I continue to do so. And there are some people I stole from, and I have tried to offer that money back. One person has refused to contact me since, rightfully so. I was horrible to him. Harms other than sex. That launched me into having to get honest about the fact that I had stolen from stores. I had stolen from my family. I had lied to people. I had manipulated people. I was learning what manipulation meant. So step 5, I got to tell my sponsor about all of this, and then she sent me home to get quiet for an hour. And during that hour, I remembered a certain thing that I didn't want to tell her, so I called her and I told her yet another thing, right? Those things that I thought that maybe I should just hold on to. Wasn't worth it. I let it go. I let it all go. And, I let it go to a woman who got it. And if she hadn't had the experience, she knew of somebody else who had had the experience. 6 and 7 are sitting, and those 5th step promises, by the way, they're so beautiful. You can look the world in the eye. I mean, I was light. I was literally light again. And there was a white light experience for me, but there was also slow progression. So I did have a beautiful experience, but I also had a lot of slow progression. And I'm in my 7th year right now, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. I am both. The 7-step prayer, it lightens me when I say it. It's basically I don't have to worry about it. You know what, if I make a mistake, if I'm seeking God, that's what the book asks of us. That's what this fellowship asks of us. We seek. We don't have to perfect. We just seek and we do the best we can. And my first great grand sponsor, she said to me, if the Dalai Lama can make 300 mistakes a day, you can make a couple too. And that's why 10, 11, and 12 come in. 10 gives me an opportunity to correct the mistakes along the way. It's my working horse. I keep it in my back pocket. When I have a moment, it's usually because there's something has just happened. I've either been a jerk or, today I've had at least 100 mistakes. I mean, the road rage alone, the shopping therapy alone, the judginess, it happens sometimes, and luckily I can't control that first think, but I can certainly control the second one, and I can certainly now turn my response over to God, which is what I call my higher power today, and I can pause and think about what it is that's going to make me act like the woman I want to be no matter what is happening around me. And for as much as I believe in that God, I can match calamity and craziness and chaos with serenity. And I have learned that that is true time and time again. So far in sobriety, I've had some great things happen, and I've had some sadness happen. My first round of 9th step went pretty well. I had to go apologize to my sister for stealing a ring, losing it, letting her think for 20 years that she had lost a ring that my grandfather had given her. I had to apologize to my brother for scaring him and worrying him. I needed to start to learn how to not judge my stepmother if I was going to show up at her house. I needed to go apologize to police for lying about my identity a couple of times. I needed to start making a living amends to people. I went back to a store at one time. I had stolen it came to me at one point, a little bit after my first 4th step, it came to me, I hadn't stolen the bracelet, but someone stole it for me. And so I talked to my sponsor, which is a really good thing to do whenever you're thinking about amends needing to be made. So I went to my sponsor and I talked to her and she said, yeah, you do owe the $40 back to this jewelry shop. And I think it was $40. So I went back to them and I walked into the store and I said, and each amend was sort of written and looked at with my sponsor. I sort of jumped ahead. So anyway, 6 and 7 are beautiful. 8 is only a list and only discovering your willingness. It's 2 parts. The list, then you're looking at your willingness, and I sort of broke it down to the easiest of willingness, then the ones that were a little more scary, and then the really scary ones. And that's how my sponsor and I worked out my 8th step list. Then the 9th step comes. I'm not doing the 9th step when I'm writing the 8th step. And that was hard for me, because it was hard for me to find that I'm here. I'm not tomorrow, I'm not yesterday, but I'm here. And so the 8th step happened, the 9th step, these amends started. And I'm in this store, And I walk in and I say, I'm here because I owe you money, and in order to stay sober, I'm going to pay you back. I stole from your store when I was 16 years old. And she looked at me and I said, I'm an alcoholic in recovery, and we go through this process of righting the wrongs that we've done. And she said, excuse me, will you just hold one moment? She went and she got her husband, who was in the back, and she said, will you please tell my husband what you just said? And I shared the story again. And he explained to me that he lost both of his siblings to the disease of alcoholism, and he had never told anybody. And so we got to cry together that day. And that was the first time he had ever heard of this disease. He had ever heard that there was hope, and he had ever had the opportunity to come out in the light versus holding his siblings' death and shame. Like, thank you for that. Thank you for giving me the gift of witnessing that, because I can't do this without all of you. And I've had an opportunity to go back to my college and apologize for wasting my professor's time. I had an opportunity to have to research African American history because I needed to make up for a time. I said, do you want money or do you want my time? He said, I want your time researching. So I did. And the schools also called me and asked me to help the students that are living sober, artistic lives. And so I do. I meet these really awesome students who are young and they're amazing. And you guys have taught me that I can learn from people I didn't expect to learn from. And so I'm learning from people who are younger than me and who look different than me, who come from different spaces than me, who don't look like the one narrow-minded, pathetic, cowardly space that I was willing to look at when I was within my stages of drinking, because that's where I thought I could be safe. You know, I've allowed God to open up my perspective. And it doesn't always come easily for me. Sometimes I'm really scared about doing it, but I do it. And when I am on the beam, sometimes I still fight it, and I get a little dry, and I get a little miserable. And the 9th step continues. I made a living amend to my father that I would stop disappearing on him 7 years ago. And I made an amend that I would stop blaming my stepmother for not letting me have time with him and hogging all of his time. I didn't make the amend to her, by the way. I simply said, Dad, I want some daughter and father time. Instead of sitting there being like, she never lets me have time with him. Like, I started to have lunches with my dad, and then she has to come along a few times. I said, that's okay too. Like, we can do both kinds of lunches, you know, but that got my panties in a bunch that day, because I was like, she's coming back and she's stealing my relationship with my father, you know. So, you know, and I've been able to show up for my dad for 7 years. And in November, Dad had a liver transplant in '93. He was given 2 years to live. And in November, he got pretty sick. And he had one more bucket list. And then in February, he was med-vac to Boston. And I got to be by his bedside through the very end. And I got to see it all. And had I not been there, like, I wouldn't have been able to tell him that I got a fellowship at his alma mater, you know? And he started to live in this beautiful dream world that I would have never experienced with joy, because it would have scared the living daylights out of me. But he started to live in this dream world where I came in, and it was one of the last times I got a chance to speak to him. I said, Dad, I got a fellowship at your alma mater. I'm doing a research fellowship. Like, I got through grad school. Oh, Cess, that's so exciting. We're going to a celebration on Saturday night. And you know, the classical music is going to be there, and that's part of your fellowship. And I had joined an arts organization with him so that we could celebrate classical music, which I don't particularly love, but he does. And so there was going to be this classical music, and this was his mind, you know, in this dream state. And he said, we're going to celebrate on Saturday night, and there's going to be birthday parties. And you know, I was able to just say, like, Dad, thanks for the birthdays. Like, he had spent so much time with these birthdays. And the next day, he went into hospice, and 2 weeks later, I got to watch him pass. And I got to bear witness to a life that I loved, and I didn't have regret. I didn't have remorse the way I had had it with my grandfather. I just didn't, I didn't need to go to his grave and say, I'm so sorry, and I'm so sad that we were never able to connect. Instead this time I had peace of mind. I'm grieving, and that feels still like something new to me. I've lost friends in sobriety, but it's different. And because I was supporting my dad and showing up as the daughter I wanted to be, I made these videos for his favorite classical music. And the last conversation that we had before he started to lose his mind is captured on camera by mistake. And the last thing he ever said to me was, "I'm so proud of you." And I have that on camera. These things these are beyond my wildest imagination for two reasons. One, I never knew I wanted that. And it's more beautiful than I could have ever created myself. There's these beautiful mistakes and these coincidences that happen when I just show up and I stay open. And I think, today, it's been an intense year. I went through graduate school this year. I'm a little older. And it was a very intensive program. I struggled getting to as many meetings as I wanted to. I stayed present for my sponsees. I didn't get as much step work as I wanted to do. I think I got a little dry. I ended an engagement, which was the right thing after some careful thought, and I called off a wedding. And my dad has died. And so today what it looks like is that I wake up and I'm usually kind of back in an old space, which is I wake up and I'm kind of beating myself up a bit. And I'm really verbally abusive to myself when I'm trying to avoid feeling. I get really verbally abusive. And I've been told I'm not allowed to treat God's children that way. And so the first thing, I've gone back to reinvigorating my program. And I'm so grateful for it because I'm oh my gosh, that's the same thing I read 7 years ago and I love it. I get to be an AA geek again. And I was really annoying when I first came into this program. I was definitely disco AA. But I wake up each morning and I need to sit up and I need to ask God to take away my thoughts. It's not the first drink today, it's the first think. And I need God to take that from me so that whatever that God is can put something better in my life. And it often usually comes in the form of someone calling me and asking me a favor, which I have zero desire to do because I'm very caught up with myself. And I now know that answering and picking up that phone is the gift I give myself every day. It is amazing what happens. Just in the past 3 weeks, I picked up the phone and someone asked me to do a film in Liberia. I picked up the phone this year at a time when a woman who has Asperger's in my class, she's got 2 PhDs, she's hyper brilliant. She has Asperger's though, so she's socially awkward. And she was put into my case study group and I thought I was gonna shoot her. And instead I said, God, thank you for teaching me tolerance. And not tolerance like gritting my teeth, teaching me compassion of who is she and how does she love this world and how does she give to this world. And holy moly, this woman, she's amazing. And she stalks all of us on Facebook and she memorizes all of us, all of our numbers, all of our family. She has this beautiful mind. And she's from Indonesia. And so we were in the case study one day. I'm just going to finish on this story. We were in this case study and we got out of it. She unsuccessfully annoyed me that day, but I stayed with her. And she got a call from her son and husband who were in Jakarta. And she said, oh honey, you can't go to the mall. We're gonna go shopping when you come here for Christmas. No, excuse me, spring break. And so I heard the conversation. She told me what she had told her son. She goes, oh, they're always shopping without me. And then that night I went home and I heard that there was a bombing in Jakarta. So I called her immediately. I said, is your family okay? She said, yes, because I told them not to go to the mall. They missed the bomb. And I was so grateful. And the next morning I walked in, and this woman had been isolated, lonely, by herself, sent by her government to fix a $6 billion problem of shrimping, getting the shrimp in Indonesia have a virus and this whole thing. She was totally alone because she had completely alienated herself from our class. And I was trying to practice AA principles. And the next morning, she came and she confided in me that it was her nephew who had been vulnerable and also somebody struggling with neurological challenges, who had been brought in by ISIS, who was the mastermind behind the bomb. And she was there alone trying to fix a developing country's problem, $6 billion country. And thank you for giving me the gift of being able to be there for her, because then suddenly a couple of other women started to be there for her. And, she ended up walking away with a huge award from our class. I didn't get an award, I got sober. That was my award. She got this huge award from the school for being such an amazing support and such a huge community builder. And that's what we get to give to other people today, just by trying to stay sober. And I'm really proud of the fact that I tried to stay sober that day. I gotta tell you, I got to seek God, and God gave me that. And that's the thing. I don't get to not drink. I get to seek a God in my understanding who can help me not drink. Sometimes one breath at a time, sometimes 1 hour, and sometimes one day. But that's what I do each morning. And then I do these steps. I keep a sponsor. I keep sponsees when I'm fortunate enough. And I trudge the road, and some days it's really blissful and beautiful, and other days it's a little more challenging, but I gotta tell you, I drove all the way here because this program works, and it's working for me, and I promise you, if you do this step work and you show up, it can work for you. And that is why I'm here 6 hours away from home tonight. I'm here because I knew in April when I agreed to this that I was going through a tough time and I needed to chase my sobriety. I needed to fall back in love with this program, and I didn't know what it was going to look like, but the question was asked and I answered yes, and I'm so grateful. So thank you all.
We have, let me see what we got going on next week. We just happen to have a speaker from Liberia coming in. It's the truth. Mr. Solon K. from Salalia, Liberia. And that was not planned. That's God working in that. That's pretty amazing. So, yeah, and I hate that. We're going to have fun. It's going to be right here. It's going to be a party. We have a nice way of closing. We want to thank Cecily one more time for coming out and sharing with us. We have a new sound system on its way. It should be here next week or the week after. That'll be really banging. You won't have to talk into this back and forth and all that. I'm sorry about that. We got a ton of food to eat. We usually go over Perkins. Don't forget 7:30 Thursdays, Big Book Study over at Salem, our sister group. We read that big book. We try to figure it out. We share it around, and people get better and they get happy, and they get to keep coming back, and they keep to live this life that everybody promised us when we got here, right? We got a nice way of closing. If you care to join us, thank you all for coming.